I don't know how else to say this, other than to just come right out and say it. I have just seen a titanic skeleton in the woods of the national park I'm staying in. I understand this place is usually reserved for fun, creepy stories, but I've genuinely never been more terrified or confused. What I'm seeing is real, and I can't think of what to do other than to beg everyone who sees this to contact me and send help. An hour ago, I was just sitting on the front porch of my cabin, watching the sunset, when out of nowhere, this enormous rumbling filled the air. The type of rumbling that you can feel the vibration in your bones. Concerned, my first thought was, well, maybe there's an earthquake. However, the problem with my earthquake hypothesis was that the ground was not shaking. It felt more like a rhythmic vibration, almost as if there were intervals. Clearly, it had to be something else, I thought. Simultaneously, I heard tree branches snapping violently out in the distance behind my cabin, and I could see flocks of birds freaking out, desperately attempting to get away from that area. Not only that, I'm also seeing this thin layer of smoke or fog among the carnage. Immediately, my mind jumped to this being an active rock slide, which meant that I needed to act fast and prepare myself in case anything was coming towards me. As I scanned the area to see if anything was headed in my direction, my eyes stopped dead back around to where I had seen the first signs of trouble. For a solid minute, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I suppose that doesn't really do it justice. It was more like my brain completely denied the reality of what I was literally staring at. A hellish adaptation of a human skeleton towered over the trees. Note that I only say skeleton because while it was close to the proper shape of one, it was entirely covered by a black film. I would tell you that the film was this thing's skin, but it undulated. It popped in weird spots, like an unfathomably extensive collection of maggots, all moving in spastic and discontinuous patterns. Pieces of this black mass, they seemed to fall off as this thing moved through the trees and scrapped violently against the branches. Its arms, they hung low to its sides, and massive, three-fingered hands that fell below its kneecaps made no attempt to move the obstacles in front of it. Its long neck was the most inhuman part of its anatomy. If it was a regular-sized model, I'd assume that someone had borrowed it from a horse or similarly shaped animal. Despite the goofy-looking nature of its neck, I could quickly tell its purpose was to allow the thing a much better range of movement to aid in its search for whatever it was looking for. This was made easier by the fact that it emitted two bright beams of light from its eyes. It was illuminating the woods below it. Silly as it sounds, it was like this thing had built-in searchlights that it used to scan every tiny being under its unrelenting gaze. By some miracle, this skeleton was a good enough distance away from me that it either hadn't noticed my presence or it just didn't care enough to inspect me. That being said, I was still effectively pinned down. Suppose I wanted to get in my car and drive off. In that case, that would require me going into the cabin, finding my keys, starting my car, turning on my headlights, and manually opening a decently sized steel gate just down the road. There were enough steps in my head that I could very well alert it to my position. In an emergency, maybe I could plow through the gate. Still, considering the potential damage to my car, it may not be usable to outrun the giant to the highway. Secondly, if I'm being brutally honest, seeing this thing made me too frightened to move any part of my body anyway. Some of you may call me a coward, and I guess that's fair. But understand this, when that early hominid part of your brain, the bit that saved our ancestors from cave lions and birds big enough to snatch children away, tells you to stay put, you fucking stay put. Unfortunately, in staying put, I damn near almost lost my hearing when this thing opened its mouth and emitted what sounded like a profoundly distorted mule deer call. It searched around a small area for about 10 minutes, calling out at different frequencies. All this before, I shit you not, I sneezed. It stopped in the middle of its call, waited for a couple of seconds, and briefly switched to what sounded like a child on a loud intercom, and it said, "Hello?" I felt my heart drop as the twisted puzzle pieces came together. Before I knew it, my hands were glued to my nose and mouth, fearing that the slightest breath would send this thing over to me in a frenzy. It took a single step in my direction, and it flashed those demonic eyes over my property. Luckily, the cabin blocked me from that wretched light, but I had clearly piqued this thing's interest, and it was easily tall enough that it would be able to see me on the other side if it got close enough. It took another cautious step towards me, and, at a lower frequency this time, repeated its inhuman question. "Hello?" At that moment, I knew I had to make a decision. Part of me was convinced that there was a good chance I would die, but that good chance would be a certainty if I did not act. My only real shot at survival was running into my cabin, finding my keys within a few seconds, and making that mad dash for my car. I'd have to hope that even after smashing through the gate, my car would have just enough left to get me into town. It was a poor gamble, and all in all, I'd be giving up the one safety net I had in allowing it to know exactly where I was. Still, anything had to be better than this thing tiptoeing its way up here, seeing me anyway, and turning me into a paste in its maggot-filled throat. Fighting every urge to run off into the woods and hide under a rock, I summoned the mental energy to prepare for what was coming next. Cursing myself in my mind, I slowly, quietly turned towards the door to begin a race for my life. But just as I had done so, I heard a groan in the distance. To my surprise, it sounded like that of an actual mule deer. The skeleton must have picked up on the noise at the same time. Its long neck immediately snapped in the direction of the sound. Its wretched searchlight eyes began flashing rapidly, and, in the sloppy manner of a starving animal, it began to tear through the trees towards that noise, as if the prey it was silently stalking just moments ago never even existed. I took this opportunity to bolt back inside my cabin, grab my keys, and hide under my bed with my phone, a rifle, and a pillow to stifle even my most shallow breaths. It's been about an hour since it left, and I haven't heard anything from outside. But honestly, I'm too afraid to go out and check. I'm leaving as soon as the sun rises, but for now, I feel as trapped as I did when I was in the open. I did make a quick call to emergency services to try and explain to them what happened and request that they send as many units as possible out to me immediately. But, as expected, they essentially assumed that I was on drugs and suggested that whatever I saw couldn't hurt me and just sleep it off. Messages to my friends are not going through, thanks to the shitty service out here. I'm trying not to break down from the frustration and the pressure and the panic. With nowhere else left to turn, I began typing this. At this point, all I can think to do is write up this story detailing my experience, post it out there, in hopes that my internet miraculously works, and one of you might contact someone who believes me, someone who can help. Or the depressing alternative, it kills me, and this serves as a final testament to my last few hours on Earth. The least that I can do is let the people that care about me know that I didn't go crazy out here or get attacked or eaten by some wildlife. If anyone has any idea of what I might be dealing with, please give me the information I'm missing. I'm unsure if there are similar stories or if this is a first, but I need to know what's going on out there. I need to know what this thing is if I'm going to have any hope of surviving the night. Well, here's hoping. Once again, this is not a joke. It's not some piece for your entertainment. I'm not trying to scare anyone or be at the center of some new urban legend. I'm just a really scared guy who's desperate for someone to believe him. And I'm begging you, anyone that reads this, anyone that may hear this, please help me.